had me at Cello, Cello. You had me at Cello. You had me at Cello. Oh, you had me at Cello. Hello, everybody. It's 5 o'clock on a Friday again, and time for Cello Chat. And a different type of Cello Chat we have today. First time ever with two guests. I'm thrilled to have with me Erica Lessie, whom we got to know a few weeks ago on Cello Chat, and then also Brenda Neese. Brenda, how are you doing too?
I'm doing well, thank you. And yourself?
I'm doing great. Erica, how have you been?
Good. Up to lots of good cello stuff.
Terrific, terrific. This is so far off to a great start this year. So viewers, I'm going to refer you all to a wonderful video that we're going to include the link for an interview that these two did with the North Carolina Cello Society, in which Dr. Neese describes her biography, like what I often like to start this show with, in detail, and including a PowerPoint with illustrations to boot. So rather than make her retell that here, I highly recommend go and watch that. I watched the whole thing and found it really interesting. And what a very distinctive path you have tread, Brenda. I mean, just in short, folks, in case you are going to watch this before watching that video, Brenda has degrees in cello performance and cello history, and basically your own hybrid degree that includes anthropology. Can you describe just briefly the degree that you created that's your own?
It's an interdisciplinary studies degree, it was called, from UNC Chapel Hill. And in that you choose 3 subjects. And I chose, actually, my primary subjects were music history and art history, along with archaeology. But I also did some classical, so I did classical archaeology, but I also did anthropology as well. But that was unofficial.
Terrific, terrific. And the other thing that, just if you two would briefly describe, how did you two meet and kind of find out your common fascination with all things cello?
May I start, Erica?
Go for it.
Okay. So I had just finished my degree in interdisciplinary studies at UNC Chapel Hill. And I wanted to go from an academic degree to a performance degree. So I was accepted to the program as a performance major at Florida State University. And so I picked up and moved from North Carolina to Florida. And Erica actually ended up being one of my mentors, because she was—
I wouldn't say mentor.
I would say that because you were in the doctoral program and I was only in the master's program.
Oh, okay.
And so that just seemed so grown up to me. And it was such a good time meeting you there, Erica. And I know we had some issues with the cello teacher, and we ended up having our own, what we called masterless classes. And Erica was one of the leaders of this. And Erica and Moises Molina and
Chambers was there. Yeah.
Yes. And so we worked together as a team because we wanted to have studio classes. So we made our own studio classes, and Erica really helped me through that. And it was just such an excellent experience, but I didn't want to stay in a program where we had to do this ourselves, although we had such a great cello section. Then Erica, again, my mentor, said, "Oh, you should check out this teacher, Martha Gershevsky in Georgia." And so I went up, and I think, Erica, you and I drove up there several times together.
Yep.
And I was so nervous. And then Martha took me on as a student, and that was just fabulous. So then I left Florida State and went and studied with Martha, but that's all due to Erica. And then fast forward, and this is the funny bit, how was it, almost 2 decades, right? And then I had these students in North Carolina. I moved back to North Carolina, and the mom said, "Oh, we're moving to Chicago." I said, "Oh, good luck." Well, then they came back after a year and they said, "Oh, we have this great teacher in Chicago." And I thought, I think I know one person in Chicago, and it's so unlikely. I said, what was your teacher's name? Oh, her name was Erica Lessie. And so I had fallen out of touch with Erica, but I very much want to get back in touch with so much in common because she was studying these bizarre cellos at Florida State. So in addition to mentoring me in cello performance, she was this great role model for studying instruments. And so anyway, through these students, it was actually ended up being 3 students in one family, and the mom got me back in touch with Erica, and then here we are.
Well, and the funny thing is I had taught the mom cello when she was a grad student. And then her kids ended up starting cello with Brenda, and then I taught them briefly, and then they went back. So they're long connection there.
All right. And Erica, is Brenda at all to blame for your fascination with bizarre cellos, or was that an...
No, the illness, Chuck, it's Dr. Olson at Florida State, because I was taking some ethnomusicology classes, and he showed me a picture of a barrel cello, and then that was the beginning. I almost, actually, looking back, I probably would have gotten a second master's in ethnomusicology instead of pursuing a doctorate, so, And what Brenda has left out of the equation is she went to Oxford in the intervening years and disappeared overseas.
Well, and actually, while we're on that, because, for one thing, to be a cello historian is already kind of unusual, outside the box. But you are, correct me please, a cello historian with a specialty in English, the history of cello in England. Is that correct?
The cello in Britain, so it also includes Scotland, and I did a survey of about 2,000 sites in Britain as part of my research for my doctorate, and then that was interesting. So it included Britain, not just England.
Okay, thank you. And which came first, the chicken or the egg? Were you interested in particularly British cello history before you went over to Oxford, or was it by studying it more in depth at Oxford that you came to realize that's where you wanted to specialize?
So I knew about the actual cello history from, I think, age 3, as you can see as you saw in the other video, when I started chasing around the countryside with my father, looking at musical instruments. So I was an organologist already. And then I thought, when I was listening to recordings, which I think is still very important, and I worry about the streaming aspects of music. It's fabulous. You can look up anything, but I don't think you always get the continuity, and you don't get the notes and everything of, what cello are they playing, and a background on the cellist if it's not on some website somewhere. So I listened to recordings, and when I did this, I fell in love with the British cello sound. I think it was very distinctive, especially at least leading up to the 1990s. And I wanted to study, my favorite cellist sound was Jacqueline Dupre. And she was just really my hero, but she died when I was in high school or early college. So she was gone. So I looked, and my old teacher, Fred Ramey, had a connection with William Fleeth. And so I ended up getting to study with William Fleeth, who was Dupre's cello daddy. And so I wanted to learn this British sound. It was very, very important to me. And I had also met Jeremy Montague on a fellowship, an undergraduate fellowship to study cello history, a general cello history. So in this interest in cello sound in playing, that got me interested also in British cello history. And then I thought, if I want to go and learn this sound, what is the best specialization I could do in Britain? Well, British cello. So it just made sense.
Excellent. All right. Well, I have a collection of questions for the two of you that are among the ones that routinely come up, primarily in our cello studio classes, but sometimes in visiting and working with high school groups of cellists or what have you. And one of them, I guess they all in the end have to do with both your variety of types of cellos that you played on, whether by different makers and different woods, etc., or on different farm implements, or And so it's like, as you go from cello to cello, there's a degree to which you are able to abstract the cello-ness of the sound that's in common, just while also experiencing the enormous variety of types of sound. So I think where I want to start with the questions is the fact that there are quite a few, but some come to mind more than others, of cellists who, no matter what cello they had in their hand, you were hearing them. So Marcio Carnero, Navarro's old teaching assistant, I remember just a week-long music festival with these hours-long master classes, and he would not open up his cello case. He would just have whoever was in the hot seat hand me your cello. And no matter how much they varied, the moment he started playing on it, you were hearing Marcio Carnero. So I'm just wondering, from your perspective of breadth of types of cellos that you played on, what thoughts you have about how that can help one identify what one sound is, or realize, oh, I want to take this from that particular instrument and this from that sound and bring them with me to whatever cello I'm playing on.
I kind of think of it as a cooperation with the player and the instrument, right? You can't force an instrument to do things it doesn't want to do. So I think it's a negotiation between the instrument and, I mean, some instruments are very reedy and some are very sweet, and you just, I think, bring out what the best is in that instrument. And sometimes you can, on a traditional cello, you can give it a fair amount of weight. Some instruments, you try a different cello, it might crush the sound if you put a lot of weight in it. And it depends on the number of strings too. Brenda, both of us have 5-string instruments, and that's such a different experience than a 4-string instrument. They're much sweeter, and if you press into that E string at the top, you just kill it. So you have to treat it almost more like a viola if you're playing a smaller instrument or a 5-string. So I think you really just have to adjust to the instrument, just like when you pick up a student's little cello, right? If you play a 10th size or a quarter size, you can't put full weight in it because you'll just you'll kill the sound. So I think that gives you a variety of knowing how to control the instrument very lightly, and then, from traditional cello, putting a lot of weight into the string.
And I agree with that completely. And I think of it also, I've spent a fair amount of time with some makers. And so the maker of a couple of my instruments, the one in this case, and actually that one, he talked to me a lot about it. He said he would take a pattern for a cello. So the one in there is a Countess of Stanlon Strat pattern. And this is kind of a weird amalgamation of a Barrett Norman and some other things. And he would take the pattern, but he would see what the wood wanted to do. So when he actually took the tools to the wood, then that got him working directly with the wood. And I think that is what we do with our sound with the cellos. So when I pick up a different cello, what I say to students sometimes, I say, in your mind's ear, what do you hear for this piece? And so it's the piece of music. It's what one hears in one's ear, in one's head before making a sound. And then you take the cello. Now, for so many years, I only had one cello. And then I was lucky to get a folding cello just to practice and travel with. But you have your one main cello, and that's what I still have, unlike Erica, who is, I think you have 13 in the room right now. But I have more.
You have baby cello too.
I have the baby cello, but still, I mean, when I think about with the standard cello, which is what the one I actually play the most, is you have that sound in your mind's ear, and the day that you can make that sound with your cello, then you found not only your sound, but you're pulling the best out of the cello. So I got hired to, when I was at Oxford, the maker heard I went and tried different patterns of his. So I tried I wanted a survey strat, and he said, "Oh no, you're a girl, you're too small, you can't play a survey strat." But he heard how I played the different cellos, and he said, "Oh, he wanted me to warm up the cellos before they went to the customer." So he'd make a cello, bring it to my house. I would keep it for a few weeks, and then it would go out to the customer. So it wasn't completely unplayed when the customer got it. So he liked what I would do with working, as you said, Erica, with the instrument, working with it and drawing the best that I could out of the instrument. And then one day he brought a survey strat. He said he'd never make one, and then he made one for a big guy. And he came and he heard me play it, and he said, "Oh, you could play it." I said, "Of course I could play it. I have very flexible hands. They're tiny, but I mean, I have a nice reach." But actually, as I age, I'm glad that I have the smaller one. So actually, Dave was right. But I did enjoy. I do like the big monster cellos because I like the deep sound. So that's probably the very long-winded way of answering. Did we actually answer what you wanted there?
I love both those answers. And if I may, just kind of two salient points that stand out to me. One of them is, like you think about sometimes the way a bow hold is taught. Do this, put this finger here, do this, put this finger there, as though the shape is the end in itself. Whereas the shape is a means to an end, which is to get the string to respond in a particular way, etc. So just like whether it's a basketball player looking at, well, how far really is that hoop right now? Or a golfer where the hole is, or cornhole. We have a cornhole champ at Whitewater right now. And he'll sit there and he'll heft the weight of the bag the whole time before he throws it. Just calculating this much weight, that much distance. What do I have to do to get it there? So you're keeping your eye on the goal, and your technique is not going to be some fixed object that's inflexible. It's going to be your tool, your means to that particular end. And then the other thing is having the different sounds in mind that you want to get. So if a particular cellist has only ever played on one cello, then, granted, they surely heard other cellos, but sometimes they can not realize just how narrow their view of a cello sound is. And then when you get to play on a wide variety of types of instruments, and you think, wow, the natural tendency of that instrument is very, very bright or very dark or very rich, very mellow, very chocolatey. And then you now have a new type of sound, if you choose to invoke it, that you're going to seek out of other instruments intentionally.
Yeah, I don't feel like I have a sound. I feel like I just, I like having different sounds by having different instruments. I don't want to have one sound.
Well, I want to segue that to get your thoughts, whether they're, if you, insofar as you've thought about what I consider to kind of be I call it a disease among a number of musicians, where they don't, until they're trained to do so or made aware of it, listen to what their sound is. When they start to play, all they're hearing is the recording that plays in their mind of how they imagine that piece going. And sometimes the student with perfectly fine ability to hear pitch in an ear training class or something like that can be oblivious because they're not really listening. Of course, then we encourage them to record themselves and listen back along those lines. But I'm also thinking that hearing so many different possibilities of what an instrument's sound can be and what the response can be, etc., maybe can help get them to listen more proactively to that variety.
Well, I think that if one of the tools I use I only, with the Cello Museum, have time for very few students, but I do have a few students, and I love teaching very much. And I will hand them a different bow. I have different bows that I think really help them all of a sudden registered that there's a different sound that they can make, because the bow makes a huge difference. So I have an old Dodd stamp bow, probably 19th century, which I love very much. And I have a modern Clutterbuck English bow, which I got on my first fellowship visit to England. And I love that. And as William Pleat says, when you hold it in your hand, it feels clumsy, but you put it on the string, it'll do what you want. It suddenly loses its clumsiness. It's that athlete who walks up and you think, how is that person going to perform this thing? And then they get up there and they're perfect for that sport. That is how my bow is on the cello, the Clutterbuck. And then I have a couple of Baroque style bows, not actually from the period modern, with actually screw, not clip-in. I'd only have one clip-in bow. But so I've got that. And the Baroque bow is one of the greatest teaching tools that I have, because that will snap a student out of what they think is going on in their heads, and also teach them bowing on the Bach that then will inform their playing on a modern bow. I don't expect them to end up with a Baroque bow, although some of them end up going and buying a Baroque bow just to practice on, even if they perform on their modern one. And it just, I feel a small change like that, even in a lesson, can really help. And yes, the recording, but I have to say, I am guilty of it too. This sort of, you fall into, I feel like I strive for a certain sound, and I have, and that's the reason I moved to England, and that's the reason I studied with William Pleat. But I haven't been playing as much because I'm so involved with Cello Museum, and I sit at the computer for hours a day, and I write and I write and I write and edit and I edit and edit, and I end up doing graphic design, all kinds of things. So I am just, playing more now because I miss it so much. I love the cello so much, but getting back into it, it's getting back to what I have in my head and what I think is coming out of the cello and what actually is coming out of the cello. So I've been very grateful. Debbie Davis actually heard me play and gave me some feedback. It was very, very valuable. And I realized, you know what? I am doing that. I'm hearing the old sound from my head and not hearing what that is actually coming out as much. It's getting better and better, and then recording. So, and I do have a sound that I want from my modern cello. And I do have a sound, which I think is similar, from the baby cello, which is out off camera here. And then I'm still working on what sound I want with the Baroque cello. I've had it for, almost 20 years now, but I still don't feel like I understand that sound as well as the modern sound in my head. So, and the understanding, and if only I could get the sound in my head out all the time, I would be playing all over the place, but I don't foresee that happening. I'm not that much of a cello athlete. But it makes me admire the concert artists who are out there all the more, because it's just, it's such a thrill to hear live performances and to admire the musicality and athleticism. It is a combination of cellists, concert cellists.
I'm just going to add one more brief thing to that. I play a fair amount of rock, and that's a different sound than the classical. And you have to get rid of a lot of the vibrato. They want more of a pure tone. And I can tell when I gig the people who've been playing a lot of rock gigs versus the classical only players, because the sound of the people who've been playing a lot of rock is harder. It's less sweet. So I have to kind of go between styles and ask myself, well, what's wanted now? And sometimes I'll even ask somebody what sound. I was doing a recording session the other day, and I said, what do you want, a classical sound? You want a rock sound? Do you want a pure sound? What is the sound you're after? So that's why I say I don't have a sound.
You have so much variety though, and you're gigging all the time with different things. So that's different. And for somebody who, I do very few gigs. That must be a great contrast for you, going from the sweetness and the depth and the dark sound of your Forster, and then to an electric cello and the rock sort of sound that they want. So
or even, I'll do it on. I play rock on my Forster if I'm in a recording session, just because it's not going to get damaged in there. But yeah, just asking, is this the sound you want? I'll play a few different sounds and ask them what they're after.
But having gone through and tried getting different sounds and experiencing different sounds, I think you can also hear a cellist who has done that and has that in their mind, because then if they get to a contrasting tune within a piece at the, just like that, they can create a very different color because, oh, something new is called for here, and then you switch to another color. Whereas people who kind of tend to always play monochromatically, they're kind of missing out.
Yeah.
Okay, so next question is about setup. So there's a lot of times that a youngster, it's either time to buy a first cello or to upgrade, and the ability to control for the factors that are set up versus that actual instrument. You know what I mean? For many of them, they kind of have to play on quite a number of cellos to start to control for, well, maybe it's just that this is the different strings that you're hearing or liking about this one versus that. And I'm just kind of wondering along those lines too, whether, let's say, taking your favorite set of strings and putting them even on your practicello or your pitchfork cello, to what extent does that help you figure, okay, what's the actual sound of this instrument versus the sound that I'm attributing to it that might in part be due to setup related things?
I know on my all of these cellos, I make sure I have the best strings. So I don't know if that's a little cheat or not, but even on my pitchfork cello, I made sure I had a decent string on there.
Nice.
We worked last summer, Erica and I, on a video of one of the things I remember doing as a student is Erica helped me find an 18th century cello that was in the style of a 17th century cello, which I made the mistake of selling so I could buy the Baroque cello. I'm happy. I love the Baroque cello, don't get me wrong, but I wish I still had the old cello as well, but I couldn't keep both. And so that cello, we went through the process of trying lots of different strings because I think each cello, beyond a certain level of quality, if you get the cheapest strings, or I tried some unbranded Chinese strings on my 5-string baby cello, and that was a disaster. They just would snap, and the quality just wasn't there, unfortunately. So you have to get to a certain level of quality, but then after that, then some cellos are going to like different strings. And then it's not just the cello, but it's also the player. So some players are going to like different things. And one of the things that, especially this time of year, when the heat's finally coming on here, we've finally sort of gotten out of the 60s and, the high 60s here in North Carolina, and the heat's finally come on. So I play gut strings, silver wound gut on the bass. And so my strings in quartet rehearsal are going nuts. And people, they're saying, why are you playing gut? It's because it's the best sound on my cello and the best sound for me. And this is a video that Erica and we're working on an article on what is the best string setup for a cello. So I think there is that. Now, one thing I've found is that there is a whole set of, I don't know how to describe it other than people think it's almost like magic. You're going to go into the back room at go to a maker's place or a shop, and they take the cello off into the back, and they tap and they knock, and then they come out and you try and see if the sound post is better or not. Well, so I started learning how to do this because the person who does my cellos is retiring. And I thought, well, what on earth am I going to do? Because the one I like the best. And then also students will come in with a setup, and I think, okay, this student, we need to fix this. So I find actually even some of my fellow teachers, even some professionals who, big players, they don't want to touch that stuff. And I try to say, look, don't be afraid of it. Don't make this some kind of mystical, magical thing. I actually have tools, and I go in and I do a lot with my own cellos. Erica has a whole workshop. So I am still learning. I'm in the learning phases now. I wouldn't want to go in on a Amati, so I get that. If you've got your Amati or your Galliano or something, if I had one, I'd probably do it because I wouldn't be too worried about it as far as adjusting a bridge or a sound post or something. I'd let someone else handle the varnish. That's tricky. But as far as setting up the sound, I can make a lot of difference with a student's instrument just in a lesson. And then sometimes if I have them leave an instrument with me for a day or two, I'll tweak the bridge or something, or knock the sound post, move it around a little bit. So I'm still very much learning that, but it's a thing that I don't think has to be as mystical or magical as sometimes it is perceived to be. Sorry, luthiers who want to,
Yep.
I don't know. Yeah. So
Well, and also I had an adult student who loved to import Chinese instruments, and then he just liked to mess around with them and have them fixed up. And so I got the opportunity to, have him experiment with the strings, and with the tailpiece actually makes a huge difference according to how much, what type of material it's made out of and what type of wood. I have an instrument actually that he gave me, which is my teaching cello. When he first brought it to me, it sounded and then we changed the strings and the tailpiece, and and now it's very boomy, in a good way.
But I still think there's still some mystical element of that, because I think it's not so much this brand or that brand of tailpiece. Again, sorry, brand makers, but it's more the amount of weight that you have, and also the resonance of the material. So how heavy is it, and what kind of resonance is it, and then what kind of player do you have, and what kind of strings are on there. So I think there's so many factors at play, and you say, what's the best cello setup? And I would say, well, that depends on the cellist and the cello, and where do you live? Because I have had to change strings. The strings sound different in England, from Florida, from North Carolina, from Chicago. So if you are in different places, you have to factor these things in: the humidity, there's a lot going on. So I wish it was a simple formula, but it's not.
When I was in Florida, the Tomastic sounded great, and up north those sound terrible.
That's right.
Right? It just depends on your humidity level, and the gut were just a disaster, in the humidity. And but I love the sound of gut, but I can't have them on gigs because they go out of tune all the time. So I had to give that up, but I would go for a gut sound on the bottom two strings if I had a choice.
Interesting.
For sure.
Along the lines of also setup, bridge height, the thickness of the bridge, the cut of the bridge, the fingerboard curvature, like you mentioned, the tailpiece. There's all manner of things, but that magical, sometimes seemingly magical sound post. I'm just wondering, in your history of the cello, I'm sure you have, it's probably hard to surprise you anymore to run across something that's absolutely strikes you as, wow, that's further outside the box than I've ever seen. But you mentioned, for example, on the other video about the different response of a cello with even just one part of it being poplar. Have people experimented with, I presume, with different woods for sound posts? And or just other aspects of the cello that we kind of take for granted. This is always this, but you've run across probably enormous variety of alternatives that people just haven't necessarily heard about. I imagine.
Well, as far as sound posts, unfortunately, I haven't seen too many early surviving sound posts that are original. So, what one of my mentors, Hélène Leroux, said, she called parts of she called instruments in use currency instruments, because they're being used, and then on the instruments you get these very you get the part of the instrument that remains, and then you get the things that get changed out and adjusted all the time. So strings, bridges, fingerboards, sound posts, pegs, these things, even now in pins, in buttons, those things all get replaced. So finding something in original condition is an unusual thing. So you asked specifically about the sound post. So I know people have experimented with that. And actually one of the makers I met, he calls that the heart of the instrument. And he said, this is what makes or breaks the sound of your instrument. And he has a whole talk he used to give about that. And so he would demonstrate how to tap the sound posts into place. It was more placement. Now, he experimented with some woods. I don't know that he experimented that much with the sound post woods, but he made cellos out of cherry and various things, local woods. So I've seen that. And that's an interesting thing to look at. Our recent bow article by Andrew Bellis, who does Bellis on bows for Cello Museum. He had one on local woods using the sort of California mahogany. I believe it was, what was it called? It was so it was a local wood. I don't think I have that exactly right, but it's a local wood on the bow for the frog and the fittings. And unfortunately, he didn't like the look of it because it sort of blends with the look of the stick. So if you're looking at it, it's all sort of much of a muchness. You don't have a beautiful dark stick or a beautiful dark frog. But, I like this idea of looking at local materials. But I do think it makes a difference. I know that, people in their efforts to do printed, the printed bridges where you can do 3D printer and 3D printing. The problem with the sound post is it is the heart of the instrument. So, Erica, have you read about experiments with the sound post wood?
I mean, not at all.
Central ones. I've seen central ones. I've seen fat ones. I've seen skinny ones. I've seen the taper, and lining up. You have to line up the wood grains so that they run across, so that they're not running together with the wood of the belly. So you run them at 90-degree angle. So, you put a pencil mark on the side when you adjust it. But I'm not sure. I wish I could answer your question better, but it is critical. It is critical. And the thing is, I think one of the most important things about setup on an instrument is that the player feels confident with their equipment. So if you come in and you go to the shop and you get your cello adjusted, or you learn to adjust it yourself, and then you feel confident with it, it's going to take that layer of anxiety off of your playing. So you're not even worried about that. You're just interacting with the music on the page, trying to get what's in your head to come out of the cello. You're interacting with the feel of the cello and then playing off the audience. What the audience, the energy is there, that you're not then going, oh, wait, is my sound post? Oh, hold on. Is this loud enough? Oh, my tailpiece is wobbling in a funny way, or, oh, there's a rattle. So you want to just take all of that out of play so that you're just at one with the instrument, I think.
Yeah, I would say, if anything, a lot of particularly young cellists, rather than those specific thoughts maybe going through their head on stage, I think more generally, the tendency I run across is for them still deep down to think of the process of performing a Bach suite or whatever it is as being like a museum piece that has to be just so. And boy, I sure hope I don't mess this up, and they're just crippled in some cases with fear of messing up this thing that is up on a pedestal. And one of the things that I try to relate, and that I'm imagining that both of you are able to impart instantly to your students is by taking an approach that the cello is, I mean, it's like you try all manner of different cellos, and you can kind of get a broader idea, philosophy of what cello playing is and what a good sound is in a particular context, and think more about this is kind of a living, what did you say, Erica, negotiation between you and the instrument. It becomes, I think, a much more enjoyable process for not only the person on stage, but as a result, the people in the audience, to see that comfort level that you mentioned, Brenda, is just something that the performer can take for granted.
Well, I think that with the cello, I think it's good to be able to try the different cellos, and you can see what sounds they make. And as a young player, I remember being worried about, will my strings go out of tune? Occasionally that was a worry. If it were in the season twice a year in this part of the world, my strings go out and are very difficult to deal with. I mean, I know how to do it now, but when I was a kid, you don't know about the different things you can put on the pegs to make them stick or slip more. And then the end pin, is the battle of how do you deal with the end pin slipping out from under you and on a different stage. And if you're, get in trouble for, I had a teacher who would take the spike and pull it out and bang it onto the stage and then put a hole. So, the stage manager, and he would go and get it sharpened too. So, I love that teacher. Anyway, but you can't do that these days. You might get in trouble. Dealing with that sort of thing. So just the uncertainty of anything. I think, trying the different cellos, yes, that gives you an idea of what's out there and what different things can happen with your cello. And I think that's actually aside from the colors you can make for a different, if you're playing Debussy Sonata versus you're playing Dvorak Concerto or you're playing a Bach Suite. I mean, I think they're all these different things. And within the Bach Suite, the different colors you want to get and the different voices that come out. So I think there are layers of what what we're dealing with here. It's not just I'm obsessed with the instruments, but then there's the whole, pulling apart each piece of music and then getting that. I think one thing that sometimes gets missed is working with the equipment a little bit more. I went to a lecture once and I consider myself as an organologist and a cellist, but as an organologist, I went to a string quartet performance of Beethoven, and it was part of a complete Beethoven cycle. It was fantastic. It was really well played. It was beautiful. We had a Beethoven expert there lecturing about it, talking about the score, but I don't understand this bowing, he said at the end. And then I looked around the room and no one else was saying anything. So, they had questions or comments and raised my hand and they called on me. And I said, well, have you ever thought of trying this with a Beethoven era bow and perhaps some Beethoven era strings? It might give you an idea of why these bowings are what they are and why the markings are in the part. Another thing is people sometimes only look at the orchestral scores when we're talking orchestral music. And they think, well, that's fine. Look at the score. But what were the players playing from? That's where you're going to find the information about what did the cellist actually play? Was it what was in the conductor score or what was it marked in their parts? So you can get your hands on these early parts. You will learn more about the cello playing of the day than just looking at an orchestral score. Unless it's an orchestral conductor who was a cellist and was obsessed with the cello bowing, which if they're conducting, that's not their main focus. They're getting the whole picture. So looking at the parts. So I think, really getting in touch with the connections, the sheet music that's available, but also the equipment. If there's any way that cellists playing Bach can try a Baroque bow, just try it. You don't have to buy it. You don't have to own one. Just see if you can try one. It makes a huge difference. And then just for fun, can you play it without the end pin? how do you hold the thing?
I was going to
I mean,
say,
if you've never tried it before, give it a go. And then when you're playing these wacky cellos, like mine are not as interesting in that way as Erica's, but having to figure out how to hold them is a fun process. And then when you go back to your end pin and you go back to your bow, it feels like coming home. And then you get even more of a comfort level, but you have this muscle memory of how that bow felt or how it felt to hold the cello. And I do feel that helps inform a cellist playing when you're playing these different pieces of music.
Well said.
yeah, absolutely. What we've been talking about the Bach Suites, and I've got the 10th size cello, which I put the viola strings on. And Brenda, show them your 5-string that she had this made for her. Playing Bach on these instruments, it's a whole different ballgame, and you understand. It's gorgeous.
So I don't know that that's highlighted, but it's anyway. You can see my one of my favorite features is the lion. So
Yeah, very nice. All right,
Yeah.
I have one last question. I'm just kind of curious too, in the breadth of what both of you have run across. Are there any either fads that kind of came and went in cello playing? Like, marking, doing something to emulate frets or mark where on the fingerboard particular pitches were, or just something that kind of seemed like it maybe was going to stick historically but didn't. Or in another direction, myths about the cello that you'd like to dispel.
This is Brenda's specialty. I'm more into the modern. She's more into the historic.
Well, I think one of the myths that we have is that all of the old cellos were bigger. That is not what I was finding, and you'll see it to this day. But I mean, I've done a statistical study of cellos, and not all cellos were these enormous things that were cut down. Some were smaller. One of the things that we have today that I think is actually a really useful thing to know is that, two things. The first is that we think of today in the 21st century, we define things. We want to put a label on it. We want to define ourselves and put labels and acknowledge them. And that is important. But this is not how people have thought all along. So this applies to two areas in particular. And one is in the size of instruments. So now you can order a full-size cello and it'll be expected to be a certain length, certain statistics, and so on. You can maybe get a Montagnana model and know that you might have to get a different case because it has a wider lower bout, especially. But that's not how it was. There was far more variety in little variations on lengths of the cello. So sometimes people now call the little ones either 7/8 or ladies' cellos or things like that. They weren't necessarily. So they're just slightly different size. And we can still see this reflected largely in, dare I say its name, the viola. So in the same way that Oxford, we don't name the other place. I don't know. Anyway, but I do. No, I do like violas. I do like violas. That's my poor attempt at a viola joke. So sizing. I wouldn't be afraid to try a slightly different. If it's a tick bigger than normal, if you're dealing with an old instrument and you have the privilege of trying an older instrument and you're considering buying one, don't be put off by a slight variation in the size. People get really hung up on that. The main thing is the setup size. So what is the string length and what is your vibrating string length? That is the critical bit. And you can actually adjust that a little bit on a slightly different size cello. And that also carries over that if you feel, say, a cellist who is aging and you're getting arthritis in your hands or something, I've seen that in some students, taught someone in her 90s. And so if you are dealing with, okay, the vibrating string length of the cello is just a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit too long. Oh no, I need to buy a new cello. No, you can actually just put a nut, just lower that bit of the nut down, make a fatter nut at the top, and make the vibrating string length a hair shorter, so that you then have a more comfortable reach. So don't be afraid of variation. And the other thing is, when reading cello history, do not assume, do not put on these, I think it's called presentism, where you're looking at how do we look at it now. You have to, in a way, put yourself in a mindset of how people thought then and how people spoke and wrote. And so in a Thomas Hardy novel, the cello might be a bass, they might have called it, in fact, pronouncing it differently, bass viol or bass viol, right? Rather than you would go into the church, and that's what you call it. And then you go into the pub, and it's then sometimes they would call it a violoncello with an I, misspell it, or a violoncello as we know it now. So, but it would be, you couldn't say something Italian in an Anglican church in the time of Thomas Hardy without being, oh, how dare it, a papist, right? Okay, so we can't have that. So the terminology really helped with context. So when we're reading these things, it's not that the character in the novel would take an instrument and carry it from the church and go to the pub and it magically became a new instrument. No, this is the same instrument called by different names by different contexts. And so I think that when we're looking at, that is not to say I know the difference between a viola da gamba. I know the difference between a cello. I know the French 7-string versus the consort instruments in English. I'm aware of this terminology, but sometimes when you read these things, just be aware of that difference. And if you're interested in the history side, and don't be put off by literature. You think, oh, that's just fiction. That's not going to have any facts in it. Well, Thomas Hardy's grandfather played the cello. So and he grew up around these church bands and at the end of them. And he worked as an architect as well as a novelist and poet and short story writer. And he helped tear down those West Galleries where the instruments played. So there are these different sources you can look at. That's probably a very long-winded answer to what you wanted. So, but I hope I answered your question.
Oh yeah, that was great. So in concluding here to the viewer, I gotta say, first, maybe you run across, as I did, the cello library at North Carolina Greensboro. All these original holdings, you can see everybody's fingerings. That's great. And then at some point you find the Musical Instrument Museum at Vermillion, South Dakota, with all these, a theremin cello and what. But then you need, and not necessarily in this order, explore what you all have put together at the Cello Museum. And I mean, it's like, and I don't see any end in sight to what you all are going to be able to add about just the fascinating and broad history of this wonderful instrument that we play. So can you two make also an additional case for why everybody needs to check out the Cello Museum in as much depth as they can?
The Cello Museum was designed to be for everyone. It's not just for high-end professionals, and it's not just for amateurs. We try to have things there, information about cellos that might be of interest to different levels of playing, different ages. And, we have unusual things. Right now, our exhibition is of innovations in cello making materials, everything from ice cellos, glass cellos, carbon fiber cellos, which are becoming much more common now. The first one I saw was in the 90s, the early 90s in Paris. But
and the flax fiber cello.
The flax fiber, oh, that's a fabulous
glass fiber.
Oh, yeah. They're beautiful instruments by a maker in Belgium. And I I think that, Erica runs these wonderful series. So if people are looking for pieces, unaccompanied pieces by women composers or Black composers,
and next year it's going to be Latinx composers.
And these are just great because what I love that you do with that, Erica, is that a lot of times you're looking for new repertoire, but it's expensive to buy the music. So you don't really want to buy it without having heard the piece or knowing a little bit more. What level is this piece? You think, oh, I like this composer. I hear some things on YouTube, but I don't know this cello piece. So this is what, Erica breaks it down and gives you the level, techniques used, the length in case you're playing this in you need it for a contest and you need a certain number of pages or a certain number of measure numbers. And I find that that's just such useful information. And we have that for people playing music, but then we have also articles on cellists, interviews with people. So if you're a non-player and are interested in the cello, then it's a way to hear more cello music and learn about some cello history. And we have other exhibitions in the works. We have lots of interesting things coming soon. We have a listing of online concerts that we never really intended to do that, but then when the pandemic came, we did that and we kept it because so many people now are performing and putting them online. And so we like to list those so people, students, other performers or audience members who don't play want to hear the cello, they can go and have a listing of what's on this week. And for a while we did the cello news where we'd sort of scrape the news from around the world and try to find interesting cello stories. And that's going to come back in a different form soon.
Brenda has to.
Yeah, it's a
10 billion hour weeks to do.
Oh, I've been working 60 to 80 hours a week and it's
unpaid too. This is
yes. And so we're juggling some things. And for people who want, dare I make a plug for if you need fun cello items like a cello mug or cello shirts, long sleeve, short sleeve, hoodies. We're starting a new initiative that we really want players of all ages and all levels to get involved with, and it's called #Cellists for Peace. We started with working for projects for Ukraine, but we are going to do other projects for a big food bank, for different charities. Yes, the children, women's shelters, various things.
Animals.
Animals. We want to help give cellists a way to take their cello playing and support movements for peace in the world and to connect with each other. And we're all trying to do good things in the world. We sit alone in our practice rooms and our homes and play our cellos. How can we make a difference? We're not all yo-yo mom who can go and play at the embassy somewhere and make international news. What can we do? Well, we can band together in this new #Cellists for Peace program, which we're starting.
And so the Cello Museum is an online museum. It's been going on for 2 years now. And you just look up the Cello Museum. And it comes up. It's an online museum. It's not a physical space, though this could, I'm kidding. But it's an online museum. So you can go there, you can find articles on the cello, just almost anything cello, basically. Anything you need to know about the cello. And if you have inquiries, if you want to know about something, please contact us and we'll try to answer those questions, or if you want to see certain articles. But I love it because Brenda researches things and then I get to read about them, about things that I didn't know about. And because there's no way we can know everything about cello, right? So,
right, which is why we say we're almost all things cello, because we would never think that we can cover everything. And we have so much that's actually not on the site because we're still fairly new and there are only so many hours in the day. We do have a fabulous team. But, we only have 2 full-time people right now. I'm one of the full-time people. Eric is one of our sort of half to 3/4 time people. And we've got a full-time assistant through the end of January. And then we're
Okay.
back to, yeah.
And because you just started in 2019.
We did, the very end of 2019, and I had that aha moment with my last meeting with my old doctoral supervisor, Jeremy Montague, and then I came back from England and went to Chicago and met with Erica before the pandemic, just actually
Very beginning.
Right. And I might have actually had COVID from that flight home, but we didn't know about COVID back then. I just was very sick for 2 weeks. So yeah.
Well, and this is the thing too. So to keep this going, we're going to be having some fundraisers. We are going to be partnering with 501c3s, sorry, so that we can accept donations and get Brenda a salary so that she could keep running this. So, keep tabs on that. That will be coming in the next few months. So if people want to give, charitable donations that they can take off on their taxes, that would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah. Yes. And here we're putting our hand out with that, but we also do giveaways, and that's what we wanted to do, a giveaway with you. So we have a t-shirt and sticker that we want to give away, and we'll let you choose how to give that away. But if you want to do a prize drawing, and then let us know, and then we'll send those out. So it'll be a sticker like on my cello case, and probably a t-shirt like Erica's.
Excellent.
Ta-da!
It could be short sleeve or long sleeve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, we'll do a drawing at the end of the month, and thanks so much. And so at Whitewater, we have a very strong undergraduate research program. And so there are, I think, quite a few musicians over the years who are always keep their ears open for things like internship opportunities. You accept, if there are students who would like to do intern work with you all.
Yeah, we do. We have a fabulous intern right now, Jonathan Simmons. And he is a performance major. He's at UNCG, so he's with that great research collection there. I know his focus is performance and teaching, but he does research as well, and we have opportunities for students to help us with projects that we're doing, and then write 1 or 2 articles during their internship, depending on how that goes, so they can get their names on the list there and have a publication out. So I love working with students, and I enjoyed teaching students at Duke in my just over a decade there. And so this is a great chance to work with students now. So anyone interested in a Cello Museum internship, please get in touch.
And anybody out there who is a composer, if you want to let us know about your music, or anybody who is making unusual cellos, we're always looking for unusual instruments. I think I've hit my limit to as many as I can.
You won't ever get to a limit. You're gonna get that barn.
I'll have to buy another house. I'll have to kick my kids out of the.
Great. Well, okay, so probably the primary running theme of this Cello Chat series has been motivation. And I know that not just speaking for myself, but my own current students, and I'm sure prospective students as well, have got to be really fired up after this. And now just anything where they're having to put down their cello for a little bit and take a break to go and explore some of these resources, whether different composers or different types of instruments, the sky is the limit. Thank you both so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having us. Really appreciate the chance to get to tell people about what we do, and the Cello Museum. This has been a dream since I was a graduate student at Oxford, and I'm so thrilled to be able to share cello history and cello information with people. I was one of my heroes was not only Jacqueline Dupre, but also Elizabeth Callan, whom I was able to meet once before she passed away. And so I would highly encourage cellists around there to get interested in what the actual instrument that you're playing, the bow that you're playing, its history, variants, interesting compositions, makers, things related. It makes
and
great
here-
program notes too, even if you never go into this stuff. If you're right, this really will help you write your program notes for your doctoral recitals. So,
And I'm just going to say that the fact that this is online makes this accessible to anybody in the world 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
And your articles are archived. So you're not just reading current things. You can go back if you find a particular article you really like, look at, previous articles. So it's really a great resource. It's free. Remember that. So anybody can access it.
And we're trying to keep it free. And that's something that's been very important to us from the very beginning, because we want to encourage people to, discover more about the cello.
Oh, and we forgot to mention we have some courses online
Yes,
too.
Erica teaches some fabulous courses, and these were, these are meant as supplemental, usually rather than to take over from your regular private teacher. These are different topics. We have a number of different topics coming up, including sort of cello fitness in terms of, I do martial arts regularly as well. I actually now beginning to teach martial arts. So we do everything from cello, or we'll be doing cello fitness through Erica, these great deep dives into positions, not getting there, but just being able to read and play all of a position across all four strings. I mean, how many people regularly play fifth and sixth position on the C string every day? I mean, so this is something that may help folks. We've got a great course on geography and a wonderful Celtic cello class for people just getting into that. It's very easy level of playing, but quite interesting ideas about improvisation and pentatonic scale and ornamentation. And then we have Nancy Green and her fabulous bow foam that she learned from her teacher in Germany. So,
and if there are any classes that you want to see that don't exist, please let us know.
Right. And if you're a professional cellist out there who wants to teach a class and has a specialization, please get in touch.
That's terrific. Well, thank you both so much for everything that you're doing. And I am thrilled. And I know that the students are going to have a lot of fun exploring everything that's out there, and then we'll be at it.
Yep.
All right. Well, take care and thanks again. And everybody, happy practicing all week, and we'll see you next Friday.